Hello, I'm Johnny Dorminy, and today I'll perform Flying Through the Fog, the turning point of safe aviation. On September 24, 1929, Jimmy Doolittle became the first pilot to take off and land completely on instruments, revolutionizing flight. Crashes caused by fog or other bad weather were the leading cause of death for early aviators. However, Doolittle's blinded, instrument-only flight marked the turning point for safe aviation. This turning point propelled aviation into a means of secure and reliable transportation. Let's join Jimmy Doolittle on September 23, 1929, speaking with philanthropist and president of the Guggenheim Foundation, Harry Guggenheim. Hello, Mr. Guggenheim. You want to hear the progress of the Blind Flight Project? Well, ever since my crash in March, everything's been smooth sailing. Yes, the irony of the pilot for the Blind Flight program crashing in fog is not lost on me. However, it is a powerful reminder of why the Guggenheim Fund is sponsoring this research. That morning, before I took off, I checked the weather forecast, and it called for clear skies all day. However, just a few hours later, and once I was precariously low on fuel, every airfield around was blanketed in a thick layer of fog, and I was forced to crash land in New Jersey. Now, it's true, the runway being covered in fog on final approach is quite dangerous, but that's not half of it. Flight-induced vertigo is an even greater danger. When that happens, a pilot can't tell if they're turning left or right. They think they're climbing, but in truth, they're diving to the deck. This is when many pilots die. They think they can handle flying in fog or bad weather or at night. Then they get lost, panic, or run out of fuel like I did, and die with a wing wrapped around a tree. I got lucky and survived without a scratch. But most pilots do not have my luck. This all goes to show what Charles Lindbergh has said before, that flight will never amount to much until we conquer the weather. If an airline promised to fly passengers in all weather, they'd have planes crashing and passengers dying left and right. But if the airline delayed for every storm, they'd be unable to guarantee service, and nobody would fly for them. We've worked on these very issues and made monumental improvements in cockpit instrumentation. Right now, the test instruments are mounted in the plane, the hood is ready to cover the cockpit, and all we are waiting for is a fog bank thick enough to prove to the world that the future of aviation is safe. Despite the potential to revolutionize everything from travel to war, aviation was considered too risky for major investment in the early 1920s. However, that all changed with Doolittle's first blind flight. Let's join Harry Guggenheim, president of the Guggenheim Fund, on September 25, 1929, at a press conference on Mitchell Field, speaking of Doolittle's flight and the future of aviation. Man's greatest enemy in the air, fog, was conquered. That was the New York Times headline this morning in reference to yesterday's flight. This all started back in 1926 when Daniel Guggenheim, my father, donated $2.5 million to create the Guggenheim Fund for the Promotion of Aeronautics. We've worked on numerous problems, but our most important research is the blind flight experiment. We determined that safety is the main thing holding back aviation. There is no lack of brilliant pilots and engineers, but if the pilot dies or the prototype is destroyed, the project will be abandoned. For this reason, we decided to solve the most pressing issue limiting every pilot: how to fly and land when you cannot see the ground. And that is quite the daunting problem. First, we had to solve the problem of altitude. Right now, plane altimeters measure altitude above sea level. But a pilot needs to know how high above the ground they are, not the sea. So we created a new instrument that measures altitude above a known level. Well, it only works if the takeoff and landing airfields are at the same altitude. It is still a significant improvement over what is currently in use. Next, we had to figure out how to get Doolittle to the airfield and onto the ground. We decided to use radio direction finding in the plane and set up radio beacons on the runway. Doolittle's team came up with a two-beacon system. The first beacon would guide Doolittle to the airport, and the second would line him up with the runway and guide him down to the ground. After that, we also created several other instruments, including a bank indicator and a rate of climb indicator. And we added a canvas hood to the plane to make sure Doolittle wasn't peeking out when he wasn't supposed to. After that, Doolittle was ready to fly. While the flight only lasted about 15 minutes, it will be known as the turning point for safe aviation. Yesterday, I sent a telegram to the president of Caltech's Aeronautics School, Guggenheim Endowed, telling him that we had created the solution to instrument flying, to fog flying. Thanks to this flight, planes of the future will no longer be under the foggy control of the weather. We have proven that if a pilot, plane, and airfield are properly equipped, nothing can stop aviation. This will allow commercial airlines to serve passengers, not just mail. And these airlines will be able to guarantee service even at night and in bad weather. This turning point for safe flight will pave the way for the golden age of aviation. What Doolittle and the Guggenheims had achieved was nothing short of revolutionary. And that was the problem. Because of the magnitude of the advancements made in cockpit instrumentation, it took many years before the aviation world caught up. While few doubted the significance of Doolittle's flight, many would still die in fog before the full implementation of instrument flying. Let's join Eddie Rickenbacker, famous World War I fighter pilot and longtime leader of Eastern Airlines, in 1949 to hear the impact of Doolittle's flight. You want to know about Jimmy Doolittle's blind flight? While most know Doolittle for bombing Tokyo and receiving the Medal of Honor for it, he himself considered his blind flight his most important accomplishment. After all, it was the turning point that made aviation safe. Thanks to Doolittle's flight, commercial aviation is possible and profitable, allowing anything to be transported faster than ever before. Not only does this allow people to move from one coast to the other in less than a day, which they often take for granted, compared to a week that it used to take, it also allows goods to reach new markets. The opportunities allowed by modern commercial aviation are only possible thanks to Doolittle's 1929 flight, just 20 years ago. Now, Doolittle's flight did not immediately end all weather-related accidents. While the first airlines started testing Doolittle's instruments just a few months after the flight, it took quite a long time to implement instrument flying, both because the instruments were immature and needed refinement, and because pilots of the era were trained to distrust their instruments. The best example of this is the airmail crisis of 1934, where the federal government canceled all commercial airline contracts and told the Army Air Corps to fly the mail. Due to lack of funding, Army pilots lacked the necessary training in night flying, and their planes lacked any semblance of modern instruments. Before the airmail contracts were returned to the airlines, less than a month later, 13 brave Army pilots had died, not fighting an enemy, but flying the mail. These pilots would have been fine with the proper training and instruments. But that is the tragedy of many technological turning points. They have the immediate, demonstrated potential to save lives, but their implementation takes time. That was 1934. Today, in 1949, we have implemented all the innovations from Doolittle's flight and even improved them, allowing commercial airlines and aviation as a whole to thrive. My own Eastern Airlines has become the most profitable airline in the nation, only because we offer safe and on-time service, even at night and in bad weather. Last year, we made over $2 million compared to our closest competitor just making $150,000. And we had the better safety record. Once instrumentation was perfected, we took advantage of the technological innovations to make air travel a tremendous part of the everyday lives of our customers. Doolittle's flight is the turning point that made aviation safe and reliable. Thank you.